Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sports Business Network's speaker series. Today, we have a great guest on the show. We have Mark Pattison. Mark is a former NFL player, and one of the things that he is known for now is he has summited the 7 highest peaks in the world. He's only, I believe, the second NFL player to ever do that, and it's an incredible accomplishment. So, welcome to the show, Mark Pattison. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you. So the one thing that we want to do with the Sports Business Network is kind of give people backgrounds and stuff like that. Now, you went to University of Washington, and you actually, I believe, when you were a junior in high school, you were a wide receiver, but you switched over to quarterback your senior year in high school.
Yeah, so actually I was when I started playing back in high school as a sophomore and a junior, I was a wide receiver and we had a really good quarterback. He was an all-state quarterback and we were a very good team, and it led me to get All-American honors and those things. And so going into my senior year, I assumed that I was going to be the quarterback. There was a guy that there's not too many of these stories where a guy in high school, 2 guys in high school, myself and a fellow named Hugh Millen, who also later went to the University of Washington and played there. And then we also went into the NFL together. So there's not that much, we start, the chances of even making an NFL team are so slight, and to have 2 guys at the same time period. But at that time, when I was a year older than him, and at that time, he had these size 13 feet, and he literally could not take 5 steps drop without being sacked. And so I was out there a little bit on an island. They couldn't get me the ball. And so they said, you know what, you're coming in, you're going to play quarterback, and Hugh, you're going to be his backup. And so Hugh, slowly rose to fame and made his own name. But that wasn't until he really grew into his body. So I did play quarterback my senior year. So when I was going through recruiting, I was being recruited as both a quarterback and a wide receiver. And just as I actually wanted to play quarterback, but I wanted to go to the University of Washington, and the University of Washington saw me as a wide receiver. And at the end of the day, they made the right choice. I probably would have had a limited career, and probably my best potential for going as far as I did was at wide receiver.
Now, how did you end up at University of Washington? You said that you wanted to go there. Did you grow up in the area? Were you always a Washington fan?
Yeah, I mean, you could see the stadium out my parents' window, and then of course I went to all the games growing up with my grandfather, sat with him. And the high school I went to was about 2 miles away from my house, my neighborhood. And then the University of Washington was about another 2 miles away. So, total, there was about a 6 mile radius. And so you really get ingrained and drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak.
Sure.
And also too, I was at a time when we were really starting to crest that. Don James, who would later become a Hall of Fame coach, was there, had started there 5 or 6 years before. They'd gone to the Rose Bowl. Warren Moon, who later became a pretty famous quarterback, was up there, took the team, beat Michigan, and then they seemed to go on this bowl continuum. My first 2 years, I went to 2 bowls, then I went to a couple of Aloha bowls, and we ended up in the Orange Bowl, and we were always in the top 10, top 20. And so I was just, in the right place at the right time. But it took me a number of years before I actually found my way on the field.
So it took you time at Washington to find your time on the field?
It did. It's just, it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. I never really had to work for it back when I was doing well in high school. And back in those days too, it was a different day, as you probably know. I mean, there weren't these Elite 11 camps, and you weren't lifting weights, and you weren't going to all these organized select type groups, which they're all doing now. And these kids are more developed, physically, lifting weights at a much younger age and much more disciplined about that. And so I really had to go to the University of Washington and just have water thrown on my face to recognize that I had a long way to go. My body wasn't ready to play. In those days, it was the Pac-10, now it's the Pac-12. And like I said, it took me 2, 3 years. I could have gone to other places like Cal and Oregon and other places like that I could have played, I'm sure, as a freshman, but it would have been the worst thing for my development. And I really had to dig down and say, is this really what I want? And are you willing to go after it? And the interesting life lesson for me is I went through Don James' pyramid of success, and there was a kind of an order of things that you needed to do before you even had a chance to get on the field. And even though I knew I had to do all these things, bigger, faster, stronger, do well in the classroom, do well in terms of knowing your plays and the playbook, there was no certainty on the other end of it that any of that was going to have meaning. There was no certainty that it was actually going to play. So I just knew we'd put myself in the best position for success if I ever got that opportunity. And, you know, later down the road, I did give that opportunity. And I think I saw one of your clips that you were starting to play at the very beginning of the show. We were down 14 points against Michigan. That was my first real start. And we made this crazy comeback, scored a touchdown with about 7 minutes to go, got the ball back, and drove the entire length of the field with about, 20 seconds or something to go in the game. The quarterback, Steve Plur, threw a ball in the back of the end zone, reached up, grabbed it, came down, won the game in Sports Illustrated. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's absolutely a lot of fun. What's it? I mean, I played football at Brown University. That's the poster behind me. And actually, that's the first time that Brown ever played in the Rose Bowl. So New Year's Day, 1916, Brown versus State College of Washington.
You know, it's interesting. You have that. Somebody just gave me that trivia question the other day, just out of the blue. Maybe that person had gone to Brown or something I was talking to. And they said, hey, did you know that Brown, or what was the first team, non-Pac-10 or non-Big Ten? They've changed conferences now, but or the names of the conferences that was actually in the Rose Bowl. And so I had no clue that Brown was actually in the Rose Bowl, but what a great accomplishment.
Yeah. But I mean, at Brown, we were used to playing in front of, 2,500 people, 5,000 people. What's it like to play in front of 110,000 people at Michigan?
Well, I've done it a number of times. And this is really where I think it's really understanding. It doesn't really matter if you're playing in front of 5,000 or there's no fans in the stadium, or there's 100,000 plus, in addition to what's on TV. And then as I got into the NFL, it's like that every weekend. And if you are so tuned in to the task at hand, just like some of the things I just got done with on Mount Everest, of one step at a time. I didn't focus a lot on what was at the top and all the other obstacles around me and the weather and the crevasses and trying to clip in. And just like I didn't focus on people in the fans. You can feel the energy, certainly, but where you really start to get in the zone is when you feel like everything is in slow motion. And that's it. Just, again, going back to when I was a freshman at the University of Washington, everything was coming at me at fast. Yeah, fast speed. It was just coming at me like I was going 85 miles per hour down the road. And by the time I got to be a junior, I'd been to a couple of Rose Bowls, and I'd been in front of all those crowds. It wasn't a big deal. And the Don James way used to be, you start on special teams and you kind of walk before you run, and you kind of anchor in there. And once you feel confident, then you can start moving up potentially into your actual position on the field. And that's what happened to me. And so it's along with the physical development is the mental development, which then goes with the emotional and everything else, the spiritual, that you can really perform at a peak place when you're in front of all these thousands of people and you're in pressure situations like that. So when I caught that touchdown, I did that essentially my first home game against Michigan. And then I did the exact same thing against Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl, my senior year, my last catch, and came down to the count corner of the end zone to win the game. And, again, it was just, I was completely locked in on just those 11 guys on our side of the ball. And I was locked in on just those 11 guys on the other side of the ball. And that was it. I didn't hear the crowd. I didn't see the crowd. I didn't feel the pressure.
Well, I guess that's exactly what they talk about when you're in the zone.
I was in the zone.
Everything slows down, everything gets quiet. and you realize, what your task is at hand. But I love,
Well,
I love what you
go
said
ahead.
about Everest, is that you were focused on one step at a time. Before we get into Everest, though, you were drafted in the 7th round of the NFL draft, and you were drafted by the Raiders, correct?
Yep.
So what was that like being drafted on draft day?
Well, look, I think, what I thought then, I would give advice today, which is for any potential draftee. And back then there was 12 rounds you could be drafted in, and then they shortened that down to 7. And it's a better deal because it gives a player more opportunities to find teams that might be a better fit versus being an 11th round draft pick. But however it plays out, the bottom line is it's so hard to get onto a team. The rosters are what they are. There's only so many guys that are invited to these different camps. And so where I think a lot of guys got into trouble mentally was where these various agencies and agents and they put you in a sort order of where they project you to be drafted. So I was projected to be anywhere between the 5th and the 7th round. And that's exactly what happened to me. And what I went into it is, expect the worst, hope for the best.
Right.
And there's too many guys that I've seen that kind of have that flipped upside down. And so if somebody says you're a 1st or 3rd round pick and they end up in the 5th round, it's a disaster. Like it's the worst day of all time.
Disappointment for them.
It's huge disappointment for them. Exactly. And with me, I was just like tickled that somebody would want to pick me and they valued my talent and that I was going somewhere. And then, so that's like phase 1. And then phase 2 is there's 32 different teams, which essentially represent 32 different markets. And that's not exactly true because the Chargers and the Rams, for example, are in Los Angeles now, but essentially you could end up in Buffalo or Green Bay and these other places. And as a wide receiver, certainly, especially growing up in Seattle, where I played a lot of football, in that wet environment, going to a warm climate, when I used to go down and play USC or UCLA or even Stanford or Cal, and then certainly spending two weeks at down in Southern California for the Rose Bowl in preparation. I mean, that was just wonderful. It just felt like I could catch anything because the ball felt so light because it was so warm, because Southern California is 72 degrees and sunny. It seems like year round.
Well, you must have been excited getting drafted by the Raiders then.
Well, it was not only that, but there was especially back then, there was such an iconic team. They'd won a Super Bowl in each one of the decades. They were led by Al Davis, and I'd never been around an eccentric person, and I felt as though he fit that mold. He lived, breathed, died Raiders, and they certainly had a lot of characters from way back in the day. And I got there kind of in that changeover period where half the team were a batch of younger guys like me, and then the other half of the team were the old school guys. I mean,
Grizzly veteran.
Yeah. No, I mean, we were talking, Jim Plunkett and Marcus Allen and Cliff Branch and Lyle Zato and Howie Long and Rod Martin and Mike Haynes and Van McElroy and Todd Christensen. I mean, the list just went on. And, the antics that they would do and the way they'd warm up, it was just a whole different cup of tea than what I was used to with the Don James, from the John James, very disciplined, hardcore, be here on time, no exceptions to the rule. I mean, it was just a different thing, but they had a formula and it worked. And when I was there, it was amazing. And those guys accepted me. And even today, they've done such a great job of creating around the league, but in particular with the Raiders, a really strong alumni to bring back a lot of these guys. So every year, COVID kind of knocked things out this last year, but every year they bring guys back up to Napa. I think it's going to be in Las Vegas this year because that's where they moved, of course. And all these old timers, and nobody cares if you're an all pro or if you're there for 10 years or 2 years or 1 year. We're just all in the brotherhood. And so it's just cool to go back and you're once a Raider, always a Raider.
Yeah. But I think I had told you in our prior discussions, my connection to the Raiders was I played football with Joe Madden, John Madden's son. And so I got to meet the Maddens, got to meet both Mr. and Mrs. Madden, great people, great family. And, obviously a tremendous coach with a huge love for the Raiders.
Well, I had a really wonderful experience, and after a couple of years, 1987, I'd made the Raider team, and 2 days later, or 2 days before the first game, I got traded to New Orleans, and it was heartbreaking. But anyway, that's what happened, and so I go down there, and I played down there for a couple of years. But um, it was the first time in the history of 20-year New Orleans Saint football that they had a winning record. It was the year I got there in 1987. And so Monday Night Football was doing a game. Bobby Hebert. Bobby Hebert was the quarterback. So anyway, the Madden truck pulls up. He used to travel. John Madden would not fly, and so he had this gigantic, the Cruiser, this huge bus, and he had the same bus driver. And so I went out in our parking lot, and he was sitting there, and I knocked on the door, and they opened the door, and John was not inside the bus, but his driver was. And I sat there for an hour listening to this guy tell all these stories about John Madden and all the road trip antics and experiences that they had, going crisscross around the country. Because if the Raiders were playing the San Francisco 49ers on a Monday night, in LA, and the next weekend the Pittsburgh Steelers were hosting the New England Patriots, he would go back and forth, right? Where most people would actually take a plane, and 3 hours or 5 hours later, they'd end up in that city. And I mean, the amount of time and the amount of experiences they had on those road trips were incredible. I just sat there and listened to all these stories. It was really cool.
Yeah, just a tremendous family, great family. Brother Mike played at Harvard as well. And, I remember the time they brought the Madden Cruiser up to Brown, and we were all excited just to get on it. So a lot of fun there. What was your transition like in leaving the NFL and going into really, work mode? What are you going to do with the rest of your life?
That's a great question. And I want to set that up by saying today they've done such a better job. The NFL set up a program called the Trust. And so they've really worked hard to bring in some former players and some people who really understand business to transition people from playing football, in my case, competitively counting college. I was at it for over 10 years. And even though I was a political science major, it really meant nothing. It prepared me to do nothing. And after playing at the highest level, in a 23-year-old, you're making six figures, it's hard to say, okay, now go back and start over when you're 30 years old. That's really a difficult thing. And so they've done a great job in terms of setting up a number of different programs, whether it's in the financial services, whether it's coaching. There's just a whole host of broadcasting. There's just a whole host of areas where they have expertise. They can set up classes, and they can send you to different universities where you can get educated to really help with that path. And in some cases pay for it. Back though, in our day, you just went off the cliff, and that was it. There were no alumni programs. There was nobody there to help you out. And so it was a struggle for me for 2 years. I mean, I was just like kind of wandering around a circle, really frustrated. And I knew I wanted to do something great. I just had no clue what to do. Ultimately, I got into a marketing business, manufacturing, and I kind of slowly started to get into the whole cycle of learning about business, finding other mentors in YEO, Young Entrepreneurs Organization, that were in other businesses. And even though they're in other businesses, it seemed like there's a lot of business problems that were the same for everybody, no matter what your vertical or your sector was. And so ended up starting a venture-backed gaming company out of Seattle, and ultimately sold that. We were in 7 countries, 700 locations, retail locations. It was pretty crazy ride. And really in the last really 10, 15 years, I could see when the internet was coming that there was going to be a huge transformation. And so I spent a tremendous amount of time teaching myself kind of how the ABCs of the internet, how you monetize things, how you socialize different platforms, which led me into working for Scout.com. And then more recently, we took over Sports Illustrated about 20 months ago. And so the umbrella company, which I helped start, is a company called Maven Technology Company. And so it's just been a fascinating ride. It seems like I learn every day, and I get to meet these amazing people with these other companies, and it's been a really cool place. But boy,
That's the cool thing that we're trying to do with Sports Business Networks is like, we want to keep educating people. It's not that you finish up college and your education is done. Now it's about education and learning things that they probably don't teach you in school. They don't teach you on how to network. They don't teach you on, I get my first year's salary and I got to pay tax on it. What do I do? All the things, the life lessons, but the mentoring, the connections, that's what the Sports Business Network is all about. So we really appreciate you being on the show because, your role and the things that you've done, other people are going to go through those same things, whether it's you're playing college football your entire life and you don't make it in the NFL, what are you going to do next? And how do you switch gears from being that athlete that you were just for probably realistically the last 15 to 18 years of your life? You did this and now it's stopped. And what do you do next? So now tell me, what are you actually doing now with Sports Illustrated?
Well, I'm in business development. That's what I do for the company. So I'm actually growing the network. Sports Illustrated had been in a lull for a long time. It's an iconic brand,
Sure.
but a tired brand, and they hadn't done a lot of things. It was sold 3 times in 4 years from big conglomerates, and so kind of the first thing that we need to do is update the technology and bring that up to actually today's standards, what that is. And that's like speed of loading, page times and things like that. From my standpoint, I started a network within the network of individual team sites. And now we've grown, I think we're the fastest growing business unit of its kinds, like Scout, like 247, like Rivals, like SB Nation, where you have team site, publishers that are publishing content on the NFL, college football per school, not just generalized content. And we've probably had the biggest success of any of those that I just named that are out there. In terms of marketplace, when we got there and we took over Sports Illustrated 17 months ago, we were number 15 in the marketplace in terms of the way that they rate how many visitors are coming per month. And this has a direct effect in terms of the advertisers in New York and other places that want to advertise with you, because it's like anytime the Super Bowl, of course, you get the highest yield based on a 30-second ad. And just like, ESPN right now is number 1 in the marketplace, and they have strength and power in terms of the types of ads that they can get and how much they can charge. But we started at number 15 when I first got there, and I brought us up to number 6 in the marketplace. My goal is to have us at number 5 by the end of the year, and ultimately put our eye on ESPN in the next few years.
That's phenomenal. Did a great job. Congratulations on that. So, you're an athlete your entire life. You're playing professional football. How do you become a person who says, I actually want to summit the top 7 peaks in the world? Where does that come from?
Well, it really came from, I think number 1, I've always been kind of at the core. I've always been a gym rat, right? And so where a lot of guys, when they got done playing, they just stopped exercising and they're like, I've had it, right? I don't want to lift another weight in my life. And that just wasn't the case for me. I just kept going. And a lot of it is just because, to me, it's like brushing your teeth. I love challenging myself in different ways. And about 10 years ago, I was going through a rough patch, and I really needed to have something pull me out, and I needed to do something phenomenal. And so I thought about it, and certainly I couldn't go back and play in the NFL anymore. And growing up in Seattle, very mountainous community, there's a lot of famous mountain climbers that have come out of the great state of Washington. We have Mount Rainier, which is a 14,500 peak. They're not too far. I could see that out my parents' window as well. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to see if any NFL players ever climbed the 7 summits. And I went on to Google, typed it in, and turned out nobody had done that. And I said, you know what, I'm going to be that guy. And just like my football, where people said, you'll never make it in college, you'll never make it in the NFL. And people are saying, why would you ever do that and jeopardize your family? You're going to die. I'm like, well, why do I have to die? Why can't that be me? I just asked that question. Why can't that be me? And so off I went. I put together a game plan, a roadmap on kind of the path of what mountains I'd want to do first. Certainly you don't want to do Mount Everest first because that by far has the most technical aspects to it. And there was danger in every single corner, just like you wouldn't go from Little League to the NFL. And so I started off with Kilimanjaro down in Tanzania, which is Africa's highest peak, and really tested myself that way. And then, I thought it'd be 7 years.
When you're putting this plan together, Mark, and
Yeah.
you're planning this, I mean, this is going to be a multi-year plan, right?
It was really supposed to be 7 summits in 7 years. And what I didn't balance in there is that Mother Nature plays a role in all this, and you can't, sometimes you just can't go up a mountain. I was in 2017, I was on Denali, which is the highest mountain in Alaska, or actually North America, which happens to be in Alaska. And, there's minus 80 mile per hour winds at the top. And we were in all kinds of snowstorms, and it was awful and it was tough. And so we ultimately had to make the call to turn around and go back down if we'd done the hardest part of the mountain, getting up there and carrying all this weight. And so I came back again in 2018. And then last year, I was all set to go to Everest. This is, March 2020. And then if you recall back during that time period, that's when the whole world, this was stopped. I mean, every day was like exponentially more critical than the day before. And it's just like, oh my God. And so ultimately Nepal shut its borders down. They shut down Everest, and like, oh my God. And so that was a setback certainly, but I just reset my mind as just like, you know what, we're going to make a new goal out of this. And I did that in many different ways. And, here I am about 35 days off the mountain from scaling the highest mountain in the world and completing the 7 summits, which has been an incredible journey.
That's amazing. Congratulations. It really is. I mean, the work that goes into this, I mean, it's months and months of planning and all of the details that go into it, because it's not just you climbing up a mountain. You are literally, I know with Everest, because I've watched different documentaries on Everest, you're climbing over ladders that are, covering these deep, giant gorges, these ice gorges and holes that you're going over. And it is literally life and death, besides the fact that you're having to deal with ridiculous, high altitude. I mean, I went on a mountain in Colorado, one of the 7 highest mountains in Colorado, and you're able to drive up to the summit. Driving up to the summit, I was getting altitude sickness. And here you are hiking it. How did that affect your body?
Well, I lost 25 pounds, and that's a lot for a guy that didn't have 25 pounds to lose. It certainly affected me on summit day. I think that the biggest shocker that people have when I tell them like what I just went through is that I was actually up in Nepal on Mount Everest for over 2 months, and you're there for over 2 months because you're doing this up and down, starting from 17,500 feet, going up and then coming back down, and then going up a little higher and coming back down. One, to build red blood cells in your system. Red blood cells carry oxygen around your system. And so you want to like load your system with as much as you can. And then we started in essentially the 1st of April, and you really don't go for the top until the second half of May. We actually went and summited. I summited on the 23rd of May, month and a half ago now. And the reason why that is because the jet stream sits on top of the mountain year round, except for these. And it's, when I say 2 weeks, it's not 14 days. It could be 6 days or 3 days or 1 day. If you recall back in 2019, where there's that big lineup that you saw going up the mountain, a lot of people died.
People couldn't go anywhere.
People couldn't go anywhere. And the reason why that happened is because that window turned out to be, I think, 2 days. And so as soon as the weather cleared, everybody got summit fever and said, let's go. And then everybody ran up the mountain. And then all these problems occurred. This year, it was crazy because we had two cyclones that hit us on the front end and the back end. And when you go up and you're going for the summit, you really are planning that about 6 days before. And we thought that we'd be going for the summit around the 20th, but we got caught in this cyclone. And so that kept us in our tents up at Camp 3, which is no place that you want to stay for a long period of time. Ultimately, we made our way up to Camp 4, and it was really just 1 day. We threaded the needle with 1 day of good weather, which we happened to hit again on the 23rd of May. People that showed up on the 24th going for the summit, 4 feet of snow, cyclone.
Wow.
People trying to go before it, got knocked out. So between that and a big COVID outbreak, of the 400 plus climbers that were up there this year, only 120 made it.
That really is. It's amazing. It's an amazing, the ability to not only just do Everest, but to do all 7 is phenomenal. As an athlete, one of the things that we always are talking about with Sports Business Networks is we are trying to get employers to realize they should only be hiring athletes. What are the aspects of being an athlete that you think are great for an employer to hire?
Well, certainly being competitive, right? Like I told you, it was my goal when we came in, we started number 15, and in 17 months, we've made our way up to number 6 in the marketplace, and ESPN is number 1. And now I have my eyes locked on ESPN. We have great momentum going on, but I think discipline, attention to detail, never quitting, following through. There's something else that I also wanted to mention earlier that you brought up about the transition and athletes and all that kind of stuff, especially for those guys out there who are listening and they're not quite sure what they want to do or how they get into it. I think the worst thing you can do is do nothing. And I've got there's like couple of things that I've found that have been absolutely essential for any success I've had is one is action creates reaction. So if you have an idea, if you have a thought, you want to pursue that. And maybe it's the absolute wrong thing that you should be doing, but at least you'll know that's the wrong thing because you took a step in that particular direction to then spin you over here. And maybe you start over here and then you meet somebody and they're influencing you in some way and they guide you in a different direction. And the second thing is, and this has been a huge, huge, huge thing for me, even now with my climbing, in my business, and that's success leaves clues. And so, there's always somebody in most cases that has come before you that has done this. And so as you're looking out there, try to align yourself with people, whether you know them or you don't know them, or you can read a book, or you can see a movie or podcast or something where they can teach you the steps on what they did and you can actually go in and replicate. And it's just like, again, like I said, it's time and again, this has worked in spades for me in terms of guiding the path from the NFL to these different businesses to now the 7 summits.
Have you ever read the book Think and Grow Rich?
I have that book. Yeah.
So it's a phenomenal book. It was written over 100 years ago. It's sold, over 15 million copies. But one of the things they talk about in Think and Grow Rich, and it's not just rich in monetary sense, it's rich in life, spiritually rich, everything. But they talk about finding out, trying to come up with what is your definiteness of purpose? What do you truly want to do? And then as soon as you realize what it is you want to do, start planning. It's not going to be perfect in the beginning, just like you said. It's not going to be perfect, and it may lead you to a different path. But the whole idea is start planning from the beginning and put all your effort into that. And that's something that I wish they would be teaching in college, and they would be explaining to people is don't just take any job. Find a job that you're truly passionate about. And it's something that you're going to wake up every day and go, I love doing this. And I think that's a huge, important, valuable lesson. But listening to what you're saying, it sounds like you're repeating the book, Think and Grow Rich. And for all the listeners out there, get a copy of the book, and they have the one that's updated for the 21st century. I still listen to the old one and love the stories in it. And it's one of my best business books that I've ever read. I know you're tight for time, so I want to finish up here. One question that we always ask everyone is this: what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, and who gave it to you?
Coach Ray E. Dorr, who is no longer with us, he was the quarterback coach at the University of Washington. He later went on and was a head coach, I think, at Southern Illinois or someplace. Just a great man, great positive energy. And he always told me it takes a little more to make a champion. And I've carried that with me all the way, even today. Through this whole COVID mess, I built a Peloton weight gym, home gym in my basement, in my garage. And one thing as I was preparing for Mount Everest, I'm big on positive messaging. And so, I've got these big, gigantic stickers, and I put on the wall down there, there's warrior and there's believe. But the first one I put across there is it takes a little more to make a champion. And every single morning I drop off my kids, they're now older, but I drop off my kids at school, I would say, takes a little more to make a champion. And if you really think about it, if you want to go to the extra effort, if you want to get to the top of Mount Everest, you want to succeed in these different businesses, you know, not everybody's going to make the NFL, but you got to go the extra different distance and do the small things if you want to separate yourself from the pack. I mean, again, success leaves clues. And if you go out there and look at the people that are kicking ass and taking names and the people that aren't, there's usually a pattern. You know, the people that are sleeping in versus being the first ones, the people that aren't exercising, the people who aren't doing the extra little steps in the way to make the difference versus the guys that are succeeding. They seem to have so many of these different bases covered. And so to me, it's just like simple. It takes a little more to make a champion. And that's really been a big, you know, difference maker for me in my life.
It takes a little more to be a champion. I love that. You know, one of the things that, as you were saying it, it made me reflect on a story when Megatron was being drafted by the Detroit Lions. I think it was his wide receiver coach who came up on the stage after he was drafted and he was given his jersey, you know, and he's coming over from Georgia Tech, and he had every coach that he ever had just said he's one of the hardest workers that they ever coached. But the wide receiver coach came up and said, "How good do you want to be?" And he said, "I want to be great. I want to be one of the best ever." He said, "Well, on days when you don't feel like working and you don't have it in you, those are the days I'm going to coach you even harder so I can get the most out of you so you can be one of the best ever." And that's it. It's those little things that it's the extra that you have to do to be the best that you can be. And, you know, and you've done that because, you know, who else is summiting the 7 highest summits in the world and in, you know, accomplishing what you've accomplished? It's just an amazing accomplishment. And it's something that people can learn from. And we thank you for being part of the show and having you on here more.
Love it. Love everything you said. Love your example about Megatron. And I think you have it right. You know, if you want to go the distance and you want to accomplish amazing things in your life, you have to really put it out there. Like, what's your stretch goal? What are you going to do? How are you going to make a difference? And really giving back too. I think this is a huge thing I've learned. We just attended a fundraiser last night, Higher Ground, which I'm now part of. My daughter's had epilepsy, and so we created a campaign within Higher Ground called Amelia's Everest. Last night was over 100,000 was raised, but as it related to that particular goal, Amelia's Everest, we raised over $56,000. The Raiders threw in money, the NFL, their social grant division threw in money, and being involved and giving back and paying it forward has been, you know, probably the biggest gift of my life, and meeting all these wonderful people and athletes that are involved in Higher Ground, and just what that means in terms of being able to see a difference in other people too and mentor them.
Yeah, well, you know what? Behind me on my wall over here is an article. And the funny thing is, the article is called Paying It Forward. And it was an article written about me in the 10th anniversary edition of Inside Lacrosse magazine. And that's what Sports Business Network is all about. It's about paying it forward. It's taking the advice that people have, how people have accomplished things, and paying it forward, taking it to the next generation to help those people to have meaningful lives where they can impact other people and they can pay it forward. I love it. We're going to end it on that. Mark Pattison, phenomenal to have you on here. Thanks so much. Good luck in everything you do. I'll be watching. Can't wait to see what you come up with next. Besides getting to number 5 with Sports Illustrated, we're going to be watching that. But I'm sure you're going to keep doing great things because that's what you do.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Mark, take care, buddy. We appreciate it.
All right. Right on. Thank you.